6 people, including Eric Clark, miraculously survive a plane crash. Looking at the aircraft wreckage on the beach, Eric is unable to recover from the shock. In the middle of the night, psychiatrist Claire Summers is awakened by a call. She's urgently summoned to provide psychological support to the survivors. Out of 100 people, only 6 made it. Mr. Perry believes Claire can handle it because she's a professional. She has 2 degrees, although her doctorate remains unfinished. Claire immediately senses that the hospital staff is far from welcoming. No one is in a hurry to answer her questions. Her first session is with Eric Clark. Claire explains why she's there. If needed, their sessions will continue one-on-one. Eric doesn't seem scared, and even remarks how nice the doctor is. Claire schedules their next meeting, Friday at 5 o'clock. Before Claire leaves, Eric unexpectedly asks if she has a sister. He advises Claire to call her sister right away, because she might get hit by a bus at any moment. When Claire returns home, there's a knock at the door. It's her nosy neighbor who brings Claire her laundry. Lately, Claire has been quite absent-minded. Tony wishes Claire good night and leaves. Later, remembering Eric's words, Claire decides to leave her sister Emma a voicemail. Meanwhile, Eric is tormented by nightmares about the crash. On Friday at 5 o'clock, all 6 surviving passengers gather for group therapy. It has been a massive shock for each of them. Everyone remembers the crash differently, the details are hazy, and the mind tends to protect itself this way. But nearly all recall some kind of flash. Suddenly Claire notices a strange man outside the window, who immediately walks away. Investigations concluded the crash happened due to pilot error. When Claire brings up the flash during her conversation with airline representative Mr. Arkin, her words aren't taken seriously. According to Arkin, the passengers are scared and might be misremembering things. Still, Claire doesn't believe it was just pilot error. Eric has an individual appointment with Dr. Summers. He doesn't want Claire to treat him like a patient, he prefers they be equals. Claire explains that symptoms of post-traumatic stress can manifest in various ways and sometimes appear much later. Eric is vice president of a major real estate company, but now he's planning to quit, realizing he has been living the wrong way. Before the crash, Eric never thought about it, there was simply no time, but now he's rethinking everything. Claire asks him to remember what he felt at the moment of the accident. Eric only recalls the wind on his face and then the plane wreckage on the beach. He barely remembers anything in between. Eric wishes Claire would stay, but she gently refuses. It would be unethical. They are doctor and patient and shouldn't cross that line. Claire's entire life also revolves around work. She tells Perry that Eric somehow knows certain details about her life, like the fact she has a sister. There's a theory that people who've been through trauma can develop extrasensory abilities, but there's no proof of that. Claire is convinced there's something wrong with the crash. Some remember flashes, others don't. Maybe the airline is hiding something. Perry advises Claire not to dig into it, her only concern should be her patients. Another group therapy session takes place today. Everyone shows up except Dean. He kept talking about an explosion and eventually withdrew even more. After the session, Shannon approaches Dr. Summers and says she shouldn't offer treatment to anyone in front of others. She has no idea what they've been through. Suddenly Norman, one of the patients, asks Claire to get into his car and drive somewhere with him. He insists that she be the one driving. Claire is confused but agrees. Norman says an airline employee is watching him. Recently, like Dean, Norman remembered a flash. There was also an explosion last year, over California. And now perhaps the airline is watching each passenger, trying to cover something up. Claire tries to calm the patient down and drives him home. Later, Claire again leaves a voicemail for her sister Emma, asking her to call back. They haven't seen each other in a long time. The next day Claire arrives at Eric's for an individual session. Recently he's decided to try painting and invites Claire to join him. She hesitantly agrees. At one point Eric becomes overwhelmed with emotion, but still refuses to talk about the crash. Instead, he starts telling Claire how beautiful she is. Sometimes Eric loses control, and with it, his grip on reality, as he keeps seeing a large white dog over and over. Claire truly wants to help him. They go out for coffee. Eric is curious why Claire chose to become a psychiatrist. Claire shares that she used to work with traumatized teenagers. She always wanted to understand people better. Later, Claire walks Eric home and asks if they'll meet again. Suddenly Eric hands her the keys to his house. Claire is flustered and clarifies that they're not a couple, they're just talking to help him deal with his trauma. Emma still hasn't responded to Claire's message, which deeply upsets her. The neighbor Tony keeps pestering Claire. She's too polite to ask the woman to give her some space. When Tony sees the keys, she assumes Claire has someone in her life. Claire says he's just her patient, and sooner or later they'll part ways for good. Tony sadly reflects on how she too missed her chances in life, and now it's too late. That night, a knock on the door wakes Claire. She's surprised to find Eric standing on her doorstep and wonders how he found her address. Eric returns the purse she left behind. He asks Claire if she'll let him in. But Claire refuses, reminding him they're doctor and patient, nothing more, and shuts the door in his face. In truth, Claire is flattered by the visit. A few minutes later there's another knock, but this time it's Tony who says he is very handsome, then leaves. Even fewer people show up for the next group therapy session. At one point Claire spots Mr. Arkin again and, apologizing to the group, approaches him and asks if she can help with anything. Mr. Arkin says he's only concerned about the mental well-being of the patients. He also emphasizes that the crash was due to pilot error. Claire firmly asks Mr. Arkin not to interfere with the therapy. When Claire returns to Eric for another individual session, she's shocked to see him on the roof. Eric invites her to join him. Despite her fear of heights, Claire climbs the ladder to the roof. It isn't easy for her. Later, Eric tells Claire they can't keep avoiding each other. Claire laughs in response. Eric mentions that he almost got married once, but backed out 2 days before the wedding. Claire says that's terrible. Eric agrees but says he was truly afraid to change his life. Now it's Claire's turn to share something personal, but she has nothing to tell. She's fallen in love a few times but has never been truly close to anyone. Unlike her, Eric says he can no longer afford to live life passively. He survived a crash. It was like being born again. At one point Eric jumps off the roof, nearly driving Claire to a panic attack. But he's completely unharmed. Later, Eric suggests a motorcycle ride through the city at night. Claire thinks it's reckless without helmets, but Eric urges her to let go of her doubts. He takes Claire to a pier, and they head out on a boat ride. Eric jokes that he has no idea whose boat it is. Or maybe he's not joking? Claire never expected Eric to want to swim, especially in such chilly weather. She concludes that maybe he just wants to feel alive, by any means necessary. When Eric takes too long to resurface, Claire panics thinking he drowned, and jumps in after him. But it turns out Eric was just playing another trick on her. Still, Claire doesn't stay mad for long. They kiss in the water. Their passion continues later, back at home. Afterward, Claire opens up to Eric about her fight with her sister. They haven't spoken in months, ever since Emma told Claire she was wasting her time. Claire snapped back with something just as harsh. Taking Eric's advice, Claire decides to make the first move toward reconciliation. She brings flowers to Emma's place, but it seems no one is home. As she's leaving, Claire sees Mr. Arkin again and realizes it's not a coincidence. He asks who lives there. Mr. Arkin also knows Claire has gotten inappropriately close to one of her patients. Her job is at risk. Claire tells Perry that 2 people are watching her, Mr. Arkin from the airline and her patient Norman, who believes he's from the airline too. 2 patients have disappeared, Norman and Dean. Something is clearly going on. Perry tries to calm Claire down, explaining that just because the patients haven't shown up doesn't mean they've disappeared. Maybe they simply decided to quit therapy. Claire confesses to Perry that she crossed an ethical line. Her relationship with Eric Clark is more personal than it should be. Eric hopes that through painting he'll be able to recall more details about the crash. Claire decides to stop by Norman's house to check on him. The door is open but no one is inside. She only finds newspaper clippings about the airline. Spotting a man with a familiar face running toward her, Claire quickly jumps into her car, while the man begs her for help. Claire drives off but soon changes her mind, turns around and asks the man why he came to the sessions. The man doesn't even remember his name. He remembers nothing and no one after the crash, except Norman and a few other passengers. Claire convinces the man to come with her, and on the way she leaves a voicemail for Perry asking him to call back as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Eric arrives at the beach where the crash happened and sees the wreckage of the plane. He slowly steps inside and sits in one of the passenger seats. The moment pulls him back into the past, to the crash. Terrified, Eric runs out of the plane and drops to his knees. Suddenly an elderly man approaches him. Claire brings the unknown man to the airport and tells Mr. Arkin that this person was on board and remembers the explosion. But Mr. Arkin insists it's just hallucinations caused by post-traumatic stress. Claire, however, refuses to accept that the passengers are disappearing one by one. The man insists he's seen Mr. Arkin before, though Arkin denies it. The confrontation unfolds in front of airport visitors. Shannon is the only one who shows up for the next group therapy session. At one point she suddenly panics and starts to run, but Claire stops her and calms her down. Seeing a silhouette, the women run in fear, but it turns out to be Eric, who's come to pick them up. Eric remembers that the plane's engine exploded. Clearly the airline is trying to cover it up. Eric drives them to Claire's house. Shannon shares with Claire that her parents died when she was 6, they fell from a cliff during a hike. Her whole life Shannon has felt like they abandoned her. Claire assures Shannon that isn't true and gently asks her to talk about the crash. Shannon only says it wasn't an accident, just like what happened to her parents. Eric's restless sleep is broken by barking. He sees his childhood dog outside the door, the one buried in his mother's garden. Eric was 7 when the dog died. Claire doesn't see or hear anything. Eric begins to think he didn't survive the crash. Claire insists everything is fine and says it must be the neighbor's dog. But Eric wants to be sure and opens the door. Suddenly he takes off running. Claire rushes after him, begging him to stop. First Eric tries to throw himself in front of a car, but the car stops just in time. Then he steps onto the tracks in front of an approaching train while Claire in tears screams for him not to do it. Somehow Eric survives. Afterward, he tells Claire never to come near him again. Heartbroken, Claire returns home but finds Tony there instead of Shannon. Tony claims that Shannon recently left with a man and a woman. She also mentions that Eric is doing fine. Claire never told Tony Eric's name and realizes Tony isn't who she claims to be. Claire rushes to Perry and shares her theory that the airline is involved in the disappearance of all the surviving passengers. Perry urges Claire to stop, implying that she's gone too far. Horrified, Claire realizes Perry is helping the airline cover things up, and runs away, unaware that Tony was there too. Claire returns to Emma's place, but once again no one is home. The bouquet Claire left last time has long since withered. Mr. Arkin appears out of nowhere and tells her that they all died because of the pilot, who wasn't even in the cockpit at the time of the crash. He had left the co-pilot alone. But Claire doesn't believe it. She insists the pilot was a hero who managed to land the plane. The 6 survivors owed their lives to him. Mr. Arkin yells that she's wrong. Before leaving he says, "It wasn't me." Claire doesn't understand what he means and begins rifling through the case he left behind. Among the documents, Claire finds a passenger list. She was one of the passengers, seated right next to Eric. Claire breaks down screaming, unable to accept the truth. Pulling herself together, she goes to Eric and embraces him, asking why he didn't tell her from the beginning. Eric replies that she wasn't ready to hear it. He also says that their deceased loved ones had been guiding each of them toward the truth. For Eric it was his grandfather and his dog. For Claire it was her Aunt Tony and Mr. Perry. No one survived the plane crash, and each of the passengers went through their own journey toward acceptance. 6 of them chose to get close to Claire in hopes of helping her come to terms with it. Claire remembers chatting warmly with Eric during the flight, when suddenly she noticed the wing was on fire. Panic broke out among the passengers. Claire screamed that she wanted to live. In the final moments of their lives, Eric held her. It was Mr. Arkin who had been the co-pilot, while the captain wasn't even in the cockpit. Eric had promised Claire that everything would be all right. Shannon had put on her headphones, accepting her inevitable death. There were no survivors from the crash. Emma and her husband come to Claire's apartment, which looks like she just stepped out for a minute. When Emma sees the letter Claire never got the chance to send, a letter of reconciliation, she begins to cry.